Hi, I'm Amanda and I'm an aspiring teacher, and today I want to show you a grammar game that I created, and it's called Grammar Goose. It's similar to the game Uno, which is a card game, but it's not the same because nobody wants to get sued. But this game is focusing on using verbs, and we're going to work with this big deck of cards that I made out of just note cards. It's super easy to make, and at the end of the video, I'll show you exactly how I broke down all the different cards if you want to start making your own. So for my game called Grammar Goose, what we're going to do is shuffle the deck and deal 7 cards to each player. Ideally, you want to have about 4 to 6 people playing. And after you're dealt, then play will proceed in a clockwise order. Each person gets to play 1 card per turn. The cards break down into different verb categories, basically. There's infinitive cards, like there's an example I made, to rest. There's gerunds, like working. Simple past tense, like thanked. And then third person present singular, pays. You can see that, if I move this, you can see this card has a star at the top. And that's because there's a little twist to the game, which I will explain. We also have prepositional phrases, prepositions that go with the verbs, and like this one, for. So you can see how these 2 cards would go together. I'll explain that in a minute. So basically, in order to play card, you have to be in the correct verb category with the 4 different categories that I showed you. So to determine the first category, since no one has played, you can just flip over the top card of the deck in the middle to show everybody, and whatever that card is will start the category that you're going to be playing in. So as the play goes around the circle of players, each person can play 1 card, but it has to be in the current verb category. So if the category is gerunds, they have to play a gerund verb from their hand. If they don't have a card to play, then they draw a card and they lose their turn. So the object of the game is to get rid of your cards as fast as possible and be the first person out. So if you have to draw a card, that's obviously bad. So then what you're going to want to do in order to move the game to your advantage is in the deck there'll also be these category cards. And so if you have one of these in your hand, you can play this at any time to change the category to your advantage. So if I have more infinitive verbs in my hand, then I can change it with the infinitive card. If it's my turn, I can play the category card and then also the appropriate verb to go with it. So I get rid of 2 cards also. And you can also mess up other players if you know they have a lot of different categories, but don't match those. What else to tell you? Okay, so the preposition cards, that's another way that you can change the category to your advantage. They're more difficult to play because they have to go with a very specific set of verbs that they match. For example, I have the verb pays. You couldn't play pays, you couldn't play the preposition on to match that. It has to be for. So if I have 4 in my hand, that means I need to watch for a small set of verbs that actually match my preposition. So it's more difficult to play. You have to pay very close attention while the play is happening. But the advantages of preposition cards, you can play them at any time. So even if it's not your turn and somebody plays the verb that you're looking for, throw your preposition card down, and then it's your turn, and you get to choose the current verb category, even if it's not the one that's already in play. So you can change the fates in your favor. So they're kind of like wild cards in that respect, but there's less of them in the deck. Then the goose part comes in, sort of like Uno. When you get down to your very last card, you can yell out goose to let everybody know you're down to your last card. And then like Uno, if somebody else calls it before you do, then you have to draw a card from the deck and you lose your turn. I think that's all the rules. And when we played it in class, it was really fun, even considering we were just playing with verbs. We didn't really realize it. But because you're working in the categories, you have to pay attention to what's in your hand and make sure that you don't miss an opportunity to play a card. So we enjoyed it even as native English speakers. The last thing I want to do for you is explain the number of cards that I made for each category, because that was probably the most difficult part of making the deck, was trying to decide, statistically what would work the best as far as how many of each category to have. And so I made a deck of 200 total cards. And like I said, made them out of note cards. Right now I have them just penciled in on most of the cards, but there's a lot of opportunity where you could, I'm working on myself, put really nice little photos on there to go with the verbs to illustrate that, and give a little context to the game. But overall, pretty easy to make. So for the different category cards like this, I made 40, no, I made 30 total category cards. There are 8 cards that just say gerund, 8 cards that say infinitives, and then 7 of the simple past, and 7 of the third person present singular. So you have 30 total category cards. Then I have 40 of each category of actual verbs. So there's 40 infinitive verbs, 40 gerund verbs, etc. And the verbs I just got from, if you Google on the internet, you can find a list of like 300 most commonly used English verbs. And those are the ones that I worked with and then just conjugated them to whatever form I needed. So that's up to you too. You can also choose ones that make really good illustrations and go with those verbs. And then you'll also want to pick verbs that will go with your preposition cards. Because you'll notice that prepositions can actually go with a lot of the other verbs, but that's the reason I marked these with a star, is that the verbs have to go with a starred. The starred verbs have to go to preposition. It can't be just any verb, it has to have the star. So you want to pay attention to that too when you're choosing your verbs. There are 10 preposition cards, and you want to double up on the types of prepositions that you use so that it's a little bit easier. I have like 3 that say for, just like this one, and 3 that say to, and 3 that say on. And that's probably how you want to do that so that the wild cards are a little bit easier to play. And when we played it, the only thing is I think I'll probably end up adding more of the preposition cards because they're a little bit too difficult to play if you're not paying attention. So you might want to work with a little bit more of the wild cards to keep the game going. So I think that's about it. And I hope that I explained the rules well and that you get a chance to make your own grammar goose or whatever you want to call it, a game like this, because it's fairly simple, easy materials, and then it's got a lot of potential if you want to make it a really nice game. And it's a fun way to play with different kinds of English verbs. So thanks for watching, and best of luck.